This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Time now for the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. And now, here she is, the smart, the sexy, the savvy, divine Miss C.
And welcome to the show, The World of Laurie Zoock. Today's guest is Andy Feinberg, author and former manager of CJA hedge funds and Kiplinger's columnist. Now, Andy is a noted author, and he recently published a fictional book called 4score+7. I want to welcome you back to the show, Andy.
It's great to be with you.
You received the ultimate compliment from a respected Lincoln biographer named Fred Kaplan, who called your novel amusing and sharp. What do you think about that? I mean, that is the ultimate compliment.
Well, that's what I hoped it would be. It's definitely a comic novel, but it is very much about politics, and it imagines Lincoln coming back and entering our very strange political world.
Now, it's funny because you bill it as fiction, but in a way it's almost nonfiction. And I want to read your Amazon profile, if I may.
Sure.
Okay. It is December 2015, and Abe Lincoln has come back to life in New York City for 2 weeks. He befriends 13-year-old Henry Mason, son of a Lincoln scholar, who helps him understand that his mission is to repair a warped political system and ease the social civil war that still simmers in the nation. Crazy? Impossible? Perhaps. But there is a more immediate problem. The 2016 presidential campaign has traumatized voters. Truth is having a brutal season. Lincoln is horrified by Ronald Crockenstock, the racist, coonskin-haired founder of the pay-toilet colossus Pay-As-You-Go, who leads the Republican field, and his irredeemably despicable rival, Arrogandez, a senator who denies the scientific explanation for everything. We have had idiots in my day, Lincoln says, but yours are bigger. Together, Lincoln and Henry battle appalling candidates, a noxious hedge fund billionaire, Fox News reality twisters, violent mobs, demonic pastors, and the political establishment. Does Lincoln have time to accomplish his goals? Can he escape the dozens of assassins on his trail? If Lincoln fails, will America slide into the abyss? Okay, tell me what part of that is fiction. What part of that is fiction, Andy?
I hope Abe Lincoln would come back, but I believe that is fiction at this point. And, certainly it's been a rough season for truth in politics, and I know lots of people left, right, and center who are scared and upset, and I understand it.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. And we're going to get into the actual political agenda or goings-on later in the show. I want to talk about you as an accomplished writer. Can you give me a little bit of background on what you've written, who you are?
Oh, sure. I've been a freelance writer for almost 40 years, and I've written 5 nonfiction books, written and edited, about personal finance and investing. And this is my first novel, and I've been active in politics. I've worked in campaigns since I was 14. And I fell in love with Abe Lincoln last May, the month before Trump announced. And I gobbled up 25 books about him. And it's a little late in life, but I'd never fallen in love with a real figure from history in the same way. And so much of what's admirable about Lincoln is so different from our time. I mean, he never told a lie. I mean, they say it about George Washington, but it's literally true about Abe Lincoln in public life. And his aides would tell him, especially after he got reelected in 1864, well, now it's time to crush your enemies, the Republicans who didn't really support you. And he said, he didn't see any percentage in it. That wasn't. So he was like the least vindictive of people. But he was still very much a politician. He was very crafty. He didn't always say exactly what was on his mind. And there's a wonderful story when he was going to pick a new Secretary of War. he let three people assume that they were the ones who had convinced him who to pick. And he didn't say, oh, Henry said the same thing.
Yeah.
So he very much knew how to make people feel a certain way, but it seems so legitimate compared to a lot of what we see in politics today.
Well,
and that
there was no social media, though. There was no Fox. There was no TV.
Right. Well, and one of the
we're traveled slowly.
Yeah, and well, in fact, to get ahead for 1 second, once he got the nomination, the way things went then, the tradition was not to campaign at all. He didn't make a single speech once he got the nomination. Even though Stephen Douglas, his Democratic opponent, did campaign. So he was just hanging out in Illinois and, reading up on things, telling his people, what to do. Some people were giving speeches on his behalf. But it's a very different world. And one of the things I try to do in the novel is to imagine how Lincoln would interact with this new media reality. And, when he appears on 60 Minutes, it gets the largest audience in the history of television, and, what he says and doesn't say is interesting because he really thinks he can help change the system. And in the 2 weeks he's back, although he's not sure he can help.
Yeah, well, I think the premise of the book is very interesting. I mean, first off, if you read 25 books, you have some knowledge, or more than most people do, of Lincoln. And I think you nailed it in the book because if anyone actually came back from that time period, they would be in shock over what's happening and how it's changed so much over time. And I think that's part of the scariest thing is, nowadays there really isn't any honesty. To me, it seems more like it's narcissism. It's, I'm the best, I'm going to do it this way, and each of the candidates has their own distinct way of what they want to do, and you gave them all names. And actually, you can talk about that a little bit, how you came up with the names of the people, that are campaigning now.
Well, the one I give the most time to is Ronald Crockenstock, who is my Trump stand-in. And you mentioned narcissism. I mean, I'm from Manhattan, and so we have known Trump very well since the 70s. And it's interesting, in a poll in 2014, over 60% of New Yorkers said they actively disliked him. I mean, he has been extremely unpopular in New York for a long, long time for... he lies about everything, and he, when he was building Trump Tower, he destroyed the artwork of Bonwit Teller, the department store that he had promised to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I just learned this weekend that in his first profile in the New York Times, he overstated his net worth by 100 times, and also lied about where his parents were from, where his family was from. He said he was Swedish. And his father is German and his mother is Scottish. And the only thing I'll say in his defense, this was a lie that his father had told. But, people, by this point, people knew it wasn't true.
But you know what? But I think a lot of people, back then, you're talking the 30s and 40s. A lot of people lied about where they were from because there was a lot of racial tension there. I mean, you had different communities. You had the Italians, you had the Jews. People didn't talk to each other, that kind of thing. And I think they were just maybe trying to protect themselves at that time.
Maybe for his father, Donald was lying in the 70s, and this was also in the 80s. In the Art of the Deal, he said he was Swedish, which I forgot. I mean, I read the book when it came out, but I forgot about that. So it's and his, he's done some good things. He
did the skating rink
rehab. I'm sorry,
the skating rink.
Yes, the city was unable to fix Woolman skating rink, and Trump came in and did it, without making a profit. And did it fine. And for the most part, he has been a competent builder. What he hasn't been is so competent in other business ventures, and he's always he's needed to overstate his accomplishments at every stage. So, with the other candidates, with the Bernie Sanders one, he's still a senator. He's from a different state, and he's more obsessed with turning us into Denmark than he actually is. And it's like to an extent that's crazy. And to me, what that points out about Sanders, there are all sorts of things about the Scandinavian countries that are good, but to think you're going to change into a country like Denmark is, even if it's a good idea.
Yeah. Is it really going to happen?
It's not going to happen.
Right.
And it's a very, but still, I understand. On Sanders and Lincoln, part of why I brought Lincoln back, I was so despairing about the polarization in America, which technology has only exacerbated, that people on the left and the right truly experience different worlds. They watch different TV networks, they read...
Isn't that bizarre?
Feeds.
Isn't that that they watch different TV? The problem is that...
totally bizarre. Although it was a little like that with Lincoln, because Lincoln there would be newspapers that were Democratic, and Lincoln was Republican. They would never support Lincoln, and they would not really report the news. They would report the Democratic news.
Right, but people don't, if they watch one network, they're not getting both sides of the story. And that's the part that kind of scares me, because that comes down to me to due diligence. And you might be better off watching the BBC to get an accurate picture of what's going on in America than watching the news in our own country.
I think that's a good point. And I think, due diligence is essential in this environment. And, there's some good, PolitiFact does very good after the fact checking, but not everyone sees it, and some of the networks do it and some of the newspapers. But Lincoln proposes in the book that with our technology we can do fact checking live, and he wants liar labels put on if someone is lying, put it on screen, and he also wants people, and what I think is actually a great idea, is pay people to read carefully chosen, like the best articles that articulate an opposing view, to expose them. I used to be in a political dinner group, and one of the guys who was on the far right would send things by email, but they were so extreme. They weren't going to convince me that I was wrong, and yet at different times I have read much more intelligent, less emotional articles that don't agree with me, but where I thought, oh, that's really interesting.
Right.
I didn't think of it quite that way.
But there aren't that many articles.
And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, there aren't that many articles. When I'm Googling at night on my iPad and I put in Trump, half the articles are pro and half the articles are con. You'll see the 10 top reasons why Trump will be president and the 10 top reasons why Trump won't be president, with two such extremist views. But where is that middle ground? And so when I peruse through these articles and I read them or I scan them to look for information like you're saying, that makes me say, let me think about that. You don't see that many that are the middle ground, and I think in part because the media is doing it that way to grab the attention of whichever party they want, rather than say, okay, here are the facts. Now do your due diligence, make some intelligent decisions based upon the facts and not the opinions, because a lot of those are just op-eds. They're not really fact-based.
Well, one of the things, and I just published a piece saying that it's okay to use the L word, that's to say someone's a liar. Today in the New York Times, writing about Trump on the front page, they used the phrase "less than truthful," which was certain. And I just want to say, a very interesting thing happened yesterday, and this is one of the things I find upsetting. Trump was ostensibly having a press conference at Trump Tower to talk about his veterans' donations.
Oh, the $6 million, right.
Right, but it turned into a 40-minute attack on the press, and he's attacked the press relentlessly. And the Wall Street Journal this morning compared him to Nixon in his hatred of the press and said, the way he's doing it makes you wonder if he is competent to be president. And this is the Wall Street Journal. This is, a right-wing editorial page, if ever there was one. But what he was doing Trump, everything he was saying was a lie. I mean, the press questions were completely legitimate. Trump was even arguing that I wanted to keep all this private when he went, when he skipped the Fox debate because of his hatred of Megyn Kelly.
Right.
And held his televised fundraiser for the vets. That was on national TV. He then said, and $1 million from Donald Trump, which turned out to be a lie. He never gave them the money until last week. So 4 months passed. And that's what the press, and the other thing is he would come to different campaigns and have these huge, Ed McMahon-style 6 foot long checks from Donald Trump to the vets group, but they weren't real, and they didn't relate to it. So there is, my view is we've never had a candidate, certainly in my lifetime, who lies the way Trump lies, and that the press has actually done a bad job of encountering this. I don't think they know what to do with it because he is so relentless, and he's also such a skilled performer. Right. And it's funny. Roger Stone, who's one of his friends and advisors, his view is when you're caught, he says, deny, change the subject, and then deny, attack, and then change the subject.
Right,
which is what Trump does.
Right, but keep in mind too. I think the reason that people do like Trump is the fact that he has no fear, and we all know that the media twists things because while the live press conference is one thing, but I'm sure I don't know if it's ever happened to you. I've been interviewed where my words have appeared, for example, in a newspaper article, and I go, "That's not what I said." And so I didn't have final approval, and I'm reading this going, but that's not what I said. They can twist it when it's in newsprint, and they can interpret it, or they can just extract certain portions of what you said, just pieces, and you don't know what came before or after. So the one thing I do have to say is the fact that he basically says, I'm not going to tolerate being abused. You might do that to other people in a certain kind of way. I respect that.
Well, when he's doing with the press, though, it's completely, I would argue it's completely disingenuous, and it's because they catch him in lies, and he is trying, and one thing, one of the dangers of Trump is that he has a very strong authoritarian streak, and that we've never seen this in any American who has been this close to the presidency. Mm-hmm. And this is authoritarian leaders throughout history have attacked the press early and often, and then when they get in have often jailed people. And Trump has said explicitly he wants to change the First Amendment so he can go after the New York Times, go after the Washington Post and Jeff Bezos. And as someone in the press, I find that enormously dangerous. And I think he's got he and some other candidates, there's a lack of respect for the Constitution and concern about where that may all
where it could go. Well, I want to go back to your book. How difficult was it for you to write this book from the perspective of a 13-year-old boy?
Well, I chose a 13-year-old, and it sort of came to me fairly early. I wanted someone who wasn't that cynical about the process, who is, he's very politically alert, and he's vice president of his class at school. He really wants to be president of his class. And he even daydreams about, oh gosh, could I be president of the United States? And he goes, well, this politics is just too sleazy. And one of the reasons I wrote this is in Lincoln's day, the best people often went into politics. And, we had some amazing founding fathers and some amazing people, subsequently. Lincoln being arguably the best of them. So I wanted Henry to interact with this, wonderful person from American history and feel that things could get better in America, and that maybe he could have a part in making some of Lincoln's ideas become adopted.
Okay.
And so, way back when I was a 13-year-old boy.
Right.
You have to
go back to the innocence. Yep.
Yes, my daughter's 13, so I did annoy her and some of her friends by just asking them certain things about the world through their eyes that I didn't know about. And, she told me that mostly kids don't care that much about politics, although they all do care about climate change. Some of them care about taxes, but she knows that's probably coming from their parents.
Right, right, that's right.
That they're not sitting around in class worried about income tax. So, and I also wanted just to imagine what it would be like for this young person to encounter a great person from history, just how this might, rock his world, and just, and he ends up becoming like the most famous 13-year-old on the planet, and I'm not going to give away exactly how that happens, but it's, so he actually truly has a chance to think about, his politics of, can it be a noble pursuit? Can you
make it into something good instead of something bad?
And with Lincoln, it was so transparent. He wanted to achieve greatness. I mean, he had a big ego, but he also wanted to be regarded as having helped the world. And politics was, he never thought about medicine. I mean, he had 1 year of school
right,
in
that's
his
right.
life. But politics was just
it was different
a natural outlet for what he wanted to do.
Well, I think then it was more respected, and over time it's become more, I don't know if the word is polluted, I guess would be my choice of words.
Polluted is a good word, but back in those days, people would go for recreation to listen to a 3-hour political speech. I mean, there were there's no organized football. There wasn't even baseball.
Yeah.
Right. You didn't go to a sporting event.
Yeah, you went to see the politicians.
To a political event.
Right.
And so, and it's interesting that the debate, obviously we talk about the debates from this election cycle, but the Lincoln-Douglas debates are still held up as the greatest political debates in the history of the United States, and they took place in 1858.
Right. Yeah.
A long time ago.
That's right, but they were of substance as opposed to now where it's basically attack and kill your competitors. I don't know. To me, it's a little off the wall. But I don't want you to go anywhere. We're gonna take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Central Payment, your number one credit card merchant service provider in the industry. Providing e-commerce solutions, POS systems, standalone terminals, mobile apps, and much more. Call Central Payments James Carner at 813-777-4332. Looking for the lowest rates in the industry and number one customer service? Call Central Payments James Carner at 813-777-4332. That's James Carner, 813-777-4332.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. certified. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Welcome back to the world of Laurie Zoock. I've got with me Andy Feinberg from New York City. He wrote a book, a novel called 407, and we're discussing that and the current election climate. Now, Andy, you had to be able to create and comment as what would Lincoln do in different scenarios, but you actually worked some real-life scenarios into this novel. Especially pertaining to the presidential contenders. So I know you've talked a little bit about the candidates in the book, because in reading the book I can tell who is who. Why did you feel that you wanted to include the news media in the book? Is it because of the twisted realities?
That is part of it. Lincoln in the book appears on the Sean Hannity show, and I chose that specifically. Hannity has always said he's not a birther, but he kept bringing it up, and he would have Trump as a guest. And, one of the things I have against Trump is the whole birther issue, which I think is,
right,
racist nonsense. And so Lincoln debates Hannity, the idea, you say you don't believe it, but you keep bringing it up, and you add this material that just ends up reflecting badly on the president. And so he was, that's one of the issues he wanted to attack. And he, I don't have him, he doesn't see the debates to a great extent because of when the book takes place, but I think he would have just been astonished, because one of the most admirable skills Trump has is devastating his opponents. I think none of us have ever seen anything like that, and with the nicknames and the whatever. But Lincoln wants to elevate this a bit, and I think he sees the press as not doing all they can to keep the candidates honest, to keep, what you were both saying, that, people sort of expect politicians to lie a lot of the time,
right,
in a way that lying obviously happened in Lincoln's day, but he does feel there was less of it, and he sees this technology. He's most fascinated by the Internet. He's not less, airplanes, cars, are less interesting to him than, especially because as a young man, he had to borrow books. He didn't have money to get his own books, and learning was everything to him. And the fact that the Internet is there is just amazing. But then Henry explains to him, well, there are like two Internets. There's the Internet for the left, there's the Internet for the right.
Exactly.
And Lincoln goes, oh, that's distressing. And what do we do about that?
And that's why, that's why you have a country divided.
Oh, and absolutely. And I imagine in the book that technology could help remedy this, but obviously technology is also partly the villain. And, you can't talk about Trump without talking about social media and how effectively he's used Twitter.
Right.
And this has changed politics absolutely. And
it has. And I want to jump in for a second. In maybe it's a sick sort of a way that I understand Trump, but he'll say, he doesn't necessarily start it, but he's not going to tolerate being abused. And I think that that's what people do like about him, is that if somebody says something abusive, he doesn't just take it, because if you just take it, you're a wimp. So instead he turns it around. But the problem is, I think there is, rather than defend himself and make a positive statement, he kind of goes off the deep end and goes for total destruction.
Right. And that, I forget if it was Trump or Melania who said basically he hits back with 10 times the strength that he was attacked. And that is. He also has a way of speaking that some of us find annoying. He did this yesterday when he says, "I'm not going to say," and he says, "I'm not going to talk about the alcoholism of William Weld, who is the vice presidential nominee of the Libertarian Party."
I saw that last night. Read that article.
Now, I didn't know that Weld had an issue with alcohol, but I find that just as a human side, really despicable. To say you're not going to talk about it when, of course, that's exactly what you've just done.
Right.
And to bring, this is, in New York we call him a knife fighter. I mean, and it's like, and he is, he's brutal. We'll see how. It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out, and just whether. You use the word wimp.
Right.
If Hillary tries to be above the fray, what is that going to look like? And are people going to assume things he says must be correct because she didn't respond, or what percentage of the time should she respond in kind, if ever? I don't know. And I just
there's no normal. The problem is there's no normal person, and I personally have a problem with. I could never vote for Hillary. I don't know if you saw the Benghazi movie, 13 Hours. Even though they didn't make that movie political, between that and the classified emails, she took a bunch of stuff from the White House when she left and had to return it. And
so did Nancy Reagan.
Okay.
Let's be fair.
Yeah, okay. But you know what? That's to me, that's stealing. You don't lie, cheat, or steal. It should be about trust, honor, and respect. And I don't see those qualities really in any of the candidates at this point. But I especially don't see those in Hillary. I don't understand how she can be married to basically a pervert who, did some terrible things with women and is going to be the first man in the White House. I don't know. There's just something wrong with that picture to me.
I understand. Certainly her, I understand why people don't trust her on certain things. I think, though, on temperament there is a difference. I mean, on Benghazi, she made a mistake. But again, just as Reagan made with the Marines in Lebanon, the 256 who died in the attack, I think her mistake was in not doing enough acting early enough to save their lives. I don't think it's in this nefarious cover-up of what happened. I think it's okay. It was a mistake, and it's. But was
it a mistake to the classified emails that they're saying? Why you keep reading these articles? Oh, the Justice Department, she's going to go to prison. This and you see it's the 50-50 articles, the pros and the cons, and then you hear, oh, she'll never, she didn't do that, and she's too good, and she'll never go to jail, and you hear all the rumors. But it's so out of proportion. The whole situation's out of proportion with reality. And I think, what's disturbing to me is I think I'm an intelligent person, so I do try to research every angle of whatever the topic is I'm interested in. But I don't find a lot of people do that. They pick the one angle that hits them personally, and they go with it. And they don't look at the other side. It's kind of like if you're a prosecutor in a lawsuit, you have to anticipate what the defense is going to say so that you kind of know both sides. And I don't see a lot of people doing that.
Right. Well, with the emails, I do think it was stupid to do what she did. I also think it may have been because she wanted to have certain Clinton Foundation things not see the light of day, which is also a distressing idea. But to me, and just on temperament, I know I see Trump as a rageaholic, and the notion that he would be in charge of starting a nuclear war, I just think is so far beyond what her flaws are. That he has exactly the kind of flaw you don't want in a president. Now, I just want to say one thing. Thomas Jefferson said the same thing about Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was the first non-aristocrat to become president, and he had been in 14 duels. He had a horrible temper, and he had a whole bunch of bullets in his body that they couldn't remove.
Oh, gosh.
And except he turned out to be a good president. He did not start any wars, and he overcame his natural tendency to fight.
Well, let me.
I wonder if Trump will do this. I suspect he can't.
That's what I'm wondering, because if you listen to his family, they show him differently. It's as if he has a public persona and a private persona. And so I also question that. I say, okay, this man has done everything right as far as, in the end, he got what he wanted. He won the Republican nomination, no matter what you say, that he got there. Now it comes down to, can he behave in a presidential and a calm manner to make decisions when it comes down to things like politics or to war. You know what I'm trying to say?
I know exactly what you're trying to say, and first of all, I have heard the same things about the family. I've also heard, before he was a father, that in the old he used to run away from the family table during arguments, and there's a reason they sent him to military school when he was 13. I mean, he was impossible. And but I think you can judge him, and of course we're not in November yet, but since he's won the nomination, he has done some very bizarre things, attacking other Republicans who haven't fallen in line. Yeah, Romney, Governor Susana Martinez, and just in ways that are obviously not helpful to him. And he, last week, the State Department rebuked Hillary Clinton for how she handled the emails. Also said, and just Colin Powell did the same thing. And I think her best defense ultimately may be that, well, Colin Powell did it too. But it was a fairly harsh report, and also said that some of what she had said wasn't true, and that especially that she asked permission. They said she didn't ask permission to do it; she just did it, and that's not a good thing. But Trump should have been attacking her last week. Instead, he was attacking Republicans, because he's really outraged that not everyone has fallen in line behind him. And
well, he was asked,
even I thought he would be able to act a little more presidential than he has. And yesterday, during this horrible news conference, when one of the reporters said, "Is this what it's going to be?" Where he's insulting reporters right and left and calling them sleazes and liars, and he said, "Is this what it's going to be like if you're in the White House?" And he said, "Yes, this is what it's going to be like," meaning all-out war with the press. And I thought, that wasn't the right answer.
No, but but wait, I'm going to jump in on that one there. You have a certain if you're the president, I think, and you're representing the people, I think one thing he understands is the rest of the people, not the rich people, everybody else, the middle class, are tired of the same old. They're tired of the cheap promises that come from politicians who say they're going to do it. Hey, listen, you get into government, you have a pension for the rest of your life. You get all these. You can vote yourself. All these medical benefits that the rest of the people, the rest of us, don't have. And this man, he's what? I think he's 70, right?
60, he and Hillary about 69.
Okay,
right.
I think he turned 70 this month. So he knows he's towards the end of his life. He's already made millions or billions. Does it really matter at this point? He's made a lot of money. He doesn't really need any money. To him, to someone who's a top producer, it almost becomes a game of how much can I make, if you come from a sales background and if you're good at it. Maybe at this point his family is saying, you know what, do it, Dad. You can turn the things around. You might piss off some people. The rich people, but you might be able to actually turn things around. But I do agree that you do have to be calm about doing that. You're meeting with world leaders. You have to tone it down. And I think possibly tone it down with the press if he were to become the president. Right now, he's struggling to, he's got the nomination, but he's struggling to become that. And if the Libertarians now have somebody entering, where does everything's a zinger? You've got all these zingers coming in. And the other thing I want to say is this. Really, if you're a politician and you've committed any type of crime, anything that's a felony, anything that's legal, that's an issue, I don't even think you should be allowed to run for president. But that would eliminate just about everybody.
Well, but then there are things that we were talking off air about Trump University.
Yes.
There are, which is clearly a scam. We don't know exactly what he knew about, but it's a terrible scam.
Well, right. He was the marketer of it. He promoted it. It doesn't sound like he was that involved with it. He probably had people involved. Maybe he knew some of it. Maybe he didn't. It sounds like he has his hands in a million different things at the same time, which has to be very difficult. But that part did disturb me. Some of the things that I was reading about it. A lot of it involved encouraging the students to max out their credit cards.
Right.
And that part disturbs me as a credit consultant. Maxing out your credit cards kills your credit scores, and then not having people who are really qualified to teach these courses. But again, you also have to look at the other side that says, there were only a few complaints initially. Now you've got maybe a class action lawsuit against Trump. People jump on the bandwagon because they go, wow, Trump, he's worth $10 billion or so, he proclaims. Let's get ourselves a piece of that pie. And you have those people jumping in.
Well,
so where's the truth?
This one, when he talks about the 98% satisfaction, that is before they went out in the world and saw that this stuff didn't work. So that's a bogus number. And also they were being watched when they filled out the things. I just want to go back to something you said because it's totally correct.
Okay.
To me, one of the most interesting things about this cycle is that Jeb Bush spent way over $100 million and got like 3 votes. And
yep.
That tells you a lot about the American public right now, that we've had 2 Bushes, we've had 1 Clinton, and there's another, and the whole Bush, Clinton, Bush, and put another Clinton at the end of that. There is,
they don't want Bushes or Clintons.
Yeah, and that means the old way of doing it. Promises that may not happen. And one thing, I think the best thing that Trump has done is shown that the Republican donor class hasn't had the best interest of Republican voters in mind, and which is true. And he has called them on it, and he won partly because of his stance on that and saying, I don't have donors, I have to placate. And I think it would be great if that happened on both sides of the aisle. If donors just, one of the questions you would raise is how do we get out of the system of the big money and the lobbyists and the whatever. And Trump and Sanders, their contribution may be showing that there is indeed another way.
Well, that's where they're going to make history, because even if they don't, either of them win the election, they change the political climate. I mean, I was never that interested in politics because to me it was always the lesser of the evils. No one really seemed interested in the people. They just seemed in getting to be king of the United States, and I think that's a better word than president at this point. But even kids I know, young kids I know, they'll go, who are you voting for? Are you going to vote for Trump or Clinton or Sanders? And so younger kids are starting to become more interested in politics. And what I'm hopeful for is down the road you'll get kids who go into politics but with a different mind frame, someone who sees how it really is and can be more controlled about their behavior and actually change the world or change the United States.
Well, and that it's exactly with that spirit in mind. That's why I wanted to write a book like this, which imagines taking a great person from American history and you see how they can shake it up. I didn't, when I wrote the book or when I started, I certainly didn't realize how much Sanders and Trump were going to shake things up by themselves, or at least make things look very different for a while. But there's, I would hope, to get back to the media for once, I would hope there's a way of, that people realize that the polarization in America is just going to devastate the country. We won't get anything done that needs to be done.
Right, because people are divided. Right.
Right, and they're.
I got to tell you this real quick because this one is just a doozy. You know, I'm sure you're probably on Facebook, as am I. Not necessarily happy about it being on that because people are on it all the time. But I actually had a situation where I have two friends I've known over 30 years back in New Jersey. And one friend wrote to the other. One friend was a Trump guy. The other one was a Clinton woman. And the Clinton one basically told the Trump one, hey, I can't be friends with you if your views and your morals are geared towards voting for Trump, because he was a liberal Democrat. And the friend actually who, like Trump, contacted me and said, okay, am I crazy or is this like really childish? And I said, no, you're not crazy. It is really childish that you can't respect somebody else's opinion and you have to unfriend them. To me, that sounds like, a bunch of 10-year-olds. That's what the world has come down to. These are adults in their 50s, Andy.
Right. Well, it's...
And that's why we have all the, all the protesters at the events and things like that. It's a bunch of 10-year-olds who didn't look at the other side of the picture because no one candidate is going to be 100% right in every situation. Oh, my gosh.
No, and I would hope that the protesters would stop protesting and work on getting their candidate elected. I remember years ago marching on Washington when Richard Nixon was president with a group from students from Columbia University, and they started throwing rocks at John Mitchell's office in the Justice Department. And I thought, this is so counterproductive. This is exactly what this president you dislike would want you to do to make you look like you're violent and stupid and dangerous, and
use your brain, not
use your brain, and
right.
and have a nonviolent protest, and needless to say, throwing rocks at this big building wasn't going to do anything anyway, except it was going to do harm. And it's like when I see some of the protests at the outside of Trump rallies. But I do think the way Trump incites violence, I think anyone who supports Trump, before you come down on that one, you have to say, this guy has actively supported the beating up of people. He has said that he was thinking of paying the legal fees of the guy who sucker punched one of the protesters who was nonviolent at the rally. And this is something we have not seen from a major party candidate. In 1968, there was a lot of violence started by the Chicago police at the Democratic Convention, but it wasn't ordered by the candidate.
Right.
It wasn't ordered by Hubert Humphrey. And I find this, especially thinking of European countries, extremely danger. Just as his refusal to disavow David Duke when he was on CNN and pretending he didn't know who he was. I mean, there are racist things he's doing, and it is very distressing. And I would say, based on our New York experience includes, when the Central Park Five were arrested and for raping a white female jogger, Trump ran full-page ads saying they should be given the death penalty for
I remember
rape.
that.
And it turned out they were all innocent, and they were railroaded, and they just won a $41 million settlement from the city, and Trump is saying they shouldn't get the money. They're still guilty. That a detective tells him he knows they're guilty, even though DNA evidence said the opposite. So there are some racially charged things he's always done that have upset the majority of New Yorkers, and he's continuing to do them, and obviously it helped him win the nomination. 66% of his Republican supporters believe Obama's a Muslim, and that's
Well, there's a lot of stories that say his birth certificate was fabricated. And the
No,
truth
but
is,
there's no story. It's not true.
Oh,
The stories
okay.
from Trump. That's an easy one.
Okay, good.
It's not true.
It's hard to tell, though, nowadays what's true and what's not true. And so I think that what disturbs people is we don't know what the truth is other than what the media feeds us unless you find other sources. And how do you find those other sources? So that's the part that's disturbing. We've got only like a minute or so to go, but real quick, before we close out, do you think there's ever a way to change the way the political system works nowadays in this country? In other words, I'm asking, is there a way to scrap it and redo it? Or totally impossible? I asked the loaded questions.
There is a way. And one of your questions that you would send me is like on the primaries. Can we change that? On
right.
both sides, a lot of people are infuriated that I thought I was voting for the candidate. Oh, I'm
yes.
just voting for the delegates. Oh, and even in some, I'm voting for the delegates who will choose the delegates. That's crazy. That has to be scrapped. There is no good reason for that.
Right, I read that, and I went,
alienates people.
Right, I read that, and I went, what do you mean? So the vote doesn't count? Then people are going, this system is stacked against us. There is no way to win, and at some point it's going to lead to some type of revolt in this country, which kind of scares me because I think if Hillary wins, that's what will happen.
What do you expect?
I don't know. I think if Hillary wins, people are either going to move out of the country because they're going to be so disgusted. Not that they won't be disgusted with Trump necessarily, but I don't know. Something is going to happen when the elections, whichever way it goes. I think something bad is going to happen. That's my gut feeling. But you know what?
Where I think, and what dovetails with the book, I see this as a pivotal election, not so much which way it comes out, but this whole election process that I think you're onto something. I think the level of disgust at the system and also the super high unfavorables of Trump and Clinton.
Right.
People feeling these are not I didn't want either of these people running.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you because we're out of time. But you're going to have to come back and do another show because I have a whole list of questions we didn't even get to because it gets to be heated discussion. But I really want to thank you for joining me.
That was great.
Yeah, your book 407, fabulous. Andy Feinberg. How can listeners purchase your book and how can you be reached?
Okay, it is on Amazon, both Kindle and trade paperback. 407 by Andrew Feinberg, Feinberg, and I'm at Andy@missinglincoln.com if you want to email. And
you have a Facebook page.
Posts up there. What?
You have a Facebook page, don't you? Because I liked it. I liked it. Yes, I found it when I was doing the research. Yep.
And I'll put more things on the website. There's a lot to comment about this year. It's an amazing year.
It is. So you'll come back and do another show with me soon?
I would love to.
Love to. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me, Andy. And for our listeners, come back next week, same time, same place. The World of Laurie Zoock.